Welcome back to our third episode of The Road to Success. We are here with Josh Segall, a co founder at Space Inch, a company which provides software engineering services, and a co founder at Game Troopers, a company which ports games to Windows operating systems. On top of being a successful entrepreneur, Mr. Segall is also an attorney, graduating from the University of Alabama School of Law with a JD. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, guys. That was a good intro.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, tell us about your experience making video games and how you got started.
I got started by accident. So I had a few friends from college. I was practicing law in Alabama. I had done a few different things. I'd been in private equity a little bit. I did politics a little bit, and we were just making kind of stupid apps on the side. We had made. The most successful thing we had made was called Lost Photos, and it pulled photos out of your email and put them in a little gallery, and you could kind of choose which ones to keep and which ones not to. Some of the email services kind of have that as a feature now. But when I say stupid, like we had made a thing called Pocket Doorbell, and the idea is you walk to someone's house and you've got their address in your phone, and so it sends them a text. Actually, like a little doorbell would pop up on your phone and you would click it and it would make a doorbell sound and it would send them a text saying, I'm at your door. That's pretty dumb. But we're actually on Fox News for it. We wrote like a cute press release. So we just made a lot of stuff like that. We had an idea, we just make it. I'm not an engineer, but I had a few friends who were. And so this was just, like a couple of friends from college. And so the first time we made any money was this Lost Photos thing. And so at that time it was like we could have gone and made more kind of photo apps, like desktop photo apps. And we just kind of randomly had an idea for a game. And that game was kind of a drinking game. So the game was called Say the Same Thing. And it was just like a game that we had kind of played together. So we loved the game. We thought it was fun. There were a lot of people making money in games. We weren't gamers. We didn't know much about games, but we knew enough to kind of figure out how to make this game. So the way the game works, you think of a random word, and I think of a random word, and then we both say it at the same time. So William, think of a random word, but don't.
Okay.
Say it. All right, you ready?
Yep.
All right, so on the count of three, say your word. 1, 2, 3.
Cat.
Computer. All right, so you said cat, and I said computer. So the idea is to think of something in between a cat and a computer, like associated with both a cat and a computer, and then you keep going until you say the same thing. The game is called Say the Same Thing.
Oh, that's cool.
So
Yeah.
so we made this thing, and we had there's a little bit of luck involved. One of my business partners is in a band called OK Go. Have you guys ever heard of OK Go?
I don't think so.
Maybe. I feel like I might have heard of
I
it.
mean, they've been around a while. So they were kind of famous for making viral videos. And Andy was the guitarist, and he still is the guitarist in this band. And so we convinced them to be our partners once we'd made the game, and they made a video for the game. And they had a little bit of a relationship with Apple. They had like a PR person who kind of knew somebody at Apple. So we submitted the game and we submitted this video. Now, like once you make mobile games for Apple and Google, there are review teams, and you can find, just like on LinkedIn, you could probably call Apple and Google and figure out, who you want to submit this stuff to. But we just figured out who the right people were. We submitted it. They watched the video. They loved it, and they called us and said they loved it. Asked a few questions, and asked for like some promotional art. So we put this thing out. We hoped that they would like it. Seemed like they were going to like it, and we ended up getting the biggest promotion that they give. We got an editor's choice for it.
Oh wow.
And then randomly, we were the 50 billionth download from the store. So this is like 2013. Yeah, so like May, June 2013. And so that was just pure unadulterated luck. you got to have some luck, right? But although you got to put yourself in a position to be lucky. So that was our first game, and it did not make a ton of money. I mean, it got about 2 million downloads in the first month because Apple promoted it so heavily, and we made some different friends who made games, and because we were making a game, we started playing a lot of games, and then once we were playing a lot of games, we had more ideas about how to make one. When we made that first game, we had no idea how to make money with the game. So most of the money we made was just advertising revenue. And you don't make very much money from advertising revenue unless you have a gigantic number of downloads and people who play just constantly. So, most mobile games, like if you guys, were going to make a mobile game yourselves, don't expect to make a lot of money off advertising. So we ended up making another 14 games over the next 6 years. And it was really the second and third games that were kind of the biggest for us. So second game was a game called Disco Bees, which was kind of like Candy Crush. It's a match 3 game, and it was kind of unique for its time. That game was sort of well monetized, and we made most of our money off in-app purchases, and then eventually a big company bought the game from us. And then we made a game called Make It Rain. Did you guys play Make It Rain before?
I have played that
Yeah,
game
same.
before.
So Make It Rain was just also a lot of luck. Our sort of philosophy was, if you take a lot of shots, eventually you'll get lucky, right? Or at least you're putting yourself in the position to get lucky. So Make It Rain, we had an idea for a game in which you play with money for a while, right? Like be able to flip through a stack of money, be able to sort of make it rain, be able to kind of play with money. And then we were sort of searching for the right like format or structure for the game. And then eventually, we kind of came up with it, but it was just, like we spent many months and a ton of money making the second game. Make It Rain, we spent about a month with one engineer, and we just kind of put it out there. We didn't really show it to Apple and Google. We kind of showed it to our person at Apple, but we didn't take it through the review process. And so we put it out there, and we spent about $5,000 on advertising it. And then we just kind of let it go because we just didn't, we didn't think anything would really happen with it. But it was doing about 100 downloads a day. And then suddenly it started doing kind of like 200 a day, and then 400 a day, and then 1,000 a day. And it was just like, hey, what's happening here? But we still kind of joke about it, didn't really expect much. And then over the course of 1 week, it went from 1,000 installs to about 200,000 installs in a day. So it
Oh,
just
wow.
it's sort of a viral tipping point. And then it was the most downloaded game in the country for about a month. And we
Goodness.
spent 4 years developing it after that. So we every single month added features, added new A/B tests, tried different things, interviewed users. We did everything we could to kind of make it keep going. And we got from about an average of about 20 cents per user to about $1.20 by the end. So it was a fabulous experience, and it still makes some money, and we don't spend any money on advertising. So it's just like a purely viral game. Mostly the players are kids a little younger than you guys. So and we used to be able to see that the downloads would kind of pick up right about 3 o'clock every day, and the usage would pick up right about 3 o'clock every day when school was getting out. So that's the broad story of sort of how we got into games.
Awesome. So
Cool,
for your
yeah.
most popular games, how many downloads in total have they garnered?
So overall, you mentioned 2 companies, Game Troopers and Space Inch. Space Inch was all original games, except for a few. We did a tiny bit of publishing for other companies through Space Inch, or in combination with other companies. Game Troopers was purely taking a game that already existed on another platform and bringing it to Windows PC or Windows Phone, or in one case, I think we did Xbox, and I think we actually did PS4 for one game. but it was mostly, taking games that were pretty successful on one platform and bringing them to a new platform. In Space Inch, it was like we make original games, and if we were publishing somebody's game, we were bringing it to Apple and Google for the first time. So that's kind of the division. So in Space Inch, we did about 40 million downloads, and we still, do something in the range of about 1,000 downloads a day. So more than half of all those downloads come from Make It Rain. So Make It Rain has done more than 20 million downloads. And then, so second biggest game was Disco Bees. That was the second game. Probably did 6 or 7 million installs of Disco Bees. But most of those installs came from advertising on Facebook and Instagram. So we would sort of make videos and like series of still shot ads that would kind of carousel through each other. And, like, sometimes you get, people who download that game because they see an ad and then they tell their friend about it. But all the downloads are mostly, the vast majority of the downloads are coming because we're running ads. So that's Disco Bees. Third biggest game is probably say the same thing, I think. And then fourth biggest game is probably a game called Pack-a-Pets. So we didn't actually, we're not the makers of Pack-a-Pets. Pack-a-Pets is a game that, it's a company called Proto Games that made Pack-a-Pets. These guys made a fabulous game, and we did, probably a little bit more than 1 million installs for that. That was very much fueled by getting YouTube creators to like play the game and video themselves playing the game and kind of talk about it while they were playing. So kind of different advertising strategies for different sorts of games. We had one other game with a pretty good number of installs called Infinite Skater. That is kind of like, have you guys ever played Subway Surfers?
Yeah.
It's an infinite runner is what we call it in the industry, like Subway Surfers, but a little bit more kind of 3D, and we did it for Apple TV also.
Cool. So, what are some of the mistakes you wish you could have avoided when starting out as an entrepreneur?
Oh, such a large number of mistakes. Um, so in the game company, at a certain point, we stopped having a unified vision of what makes a great game. So I think, one of the things we could have done better was just sort of have a really good, tight consensus on who makes what decisions and how the games function. So that's one thing that's really important. Another thing, I think there were some games that if we had done a little bit more research, we probably could have learned that, that wasn't necessarily going to be a great game to make. Biggest thing, most important thing, I think, is just focus. Like find a couple of things, ideally sort of one thing you do well, and really focus on that thing. We tried a strategy at one point of publishing lots of little games. There are companies that do really, really well at publishing a lot of little games, but you've got to really be committed to that strategy. You can't sort of do a little bit of that and then also try to make some big games on your own. If you can have a strategy like that, you just got to be really, really into it. When it comes to games generally, it's best to have kind of one or two genre of game that you know really well and you know how to make money with that genre. So, like we had some success with match 3 games, and we had some success with, idle games or clickers. But we tried other genres besides those two, and I think we probably would have been better off kind of sticking to those two genres.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for others that have a business idea but are too afraid to pursue it because of the risk?
Yeah. First of all, like most businesses and business ideas fail. Um, so on the one hand, in order not to fail, it's important just to do your homework. So if you've got an idea, really look to see, who the competitors are. Almost regardless of what your idea is, somebody's kind of already tried it and failed. So, look at the people who have tried it and failed and try to understand what they did that you think you can improve on. I mean, usually any big company you've seen, there are, I mean, even Facebook, right? There was MySpace and Friendster and a bunch of other stuff before Facebook. It's really a matter of kind of getting it right. Second thing, I think like the easiest way when you're making any product to know that you're going to have a certain level of success is to go ahead and talk to potential customers before you make the thing. So, with games, we used to do some mock-ups of the game, and we used to, like make the logo and a couple of screens and do some, like make up a kind of a marketing campaign. And then we would run a campaign on Facebook and say, like download this game. And then once you click the download button, you would just go to a website that said, hey, this game isn't quite ready yet, but, if you're interested, give us your email. And so we could use that to gauge whether people are going to be interested in the game or not. It did like almost no matter what your business is, you can go out and talk to potential customers one way or the other and kind of figure out whether you have an idea that, solves a pain for people or, is the sort of thing that people are looking for. Our main insight when it came to making Disco Bees was that a lot of people were playing Candy Crush, and the farther you get in Candy Crush, the harder the game is. So people were looking for an extra game when either they got tired of Candy Crush or they had just reached a point where they just feel like they're losing a lot and they wanted to like put their energy into something where they could win a little bit more, right? So they wanted to kind of diversify that experience for a couple different reasons. And so, we thought we could be that second match three game that somebody plays. Is that a huge pain in their lives? I don't know, but it's certainly a problem that people had that we had an idea about how to solve. And we could see pretty clearly from the evidence in the market that people were interested in having a second or a third or a fourth match three game that they played. What else? And I think just the last sort of general thing is like it's really hard to avoid mistakes overall. Like you just gotta kind of get in there and throw some punches and make some mistakes, and that's kind of the only way that you learn. In my experience. So again, our sort of view from the start was always you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna fail. Most games we make are gonna fail. So we want to make more games so that we have more shots. I'm not sure, looking back, that that's kind of the way I would do it in games, but generally speaking, being an entrepreneur is about risk, and if you feel like you can lessen the risk in some ways, that's certainly good. But often, like there's some luck involved, and there's just some unpredictable things, and you just gotta kind of give it a shot.
Very true. So, how has COVID affected your business, and how have you kind of adapted to that new market?
Uh, so my business now, at a certain point, we decided that, we weren't going to keep making games. Um, but we decided what we would do instead is, do different kinds of things in technology. And to some extent together, to some extent separately. So, for instance, we bought half of an outsourced dev shop in Spain, and we helped operate that shop. Then, when I moved to Nashville about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, we spun out of that game company and outsourced, corporate dev shop where we're making sort of healthcare and insurance apps. Two things we have a decent amount of in Nashville. Uh, I found that I liked that business. And so over time, I, uh, worked to kind of build a shop in Poland. And now this year, I'm sort of building a new shop in Croatia, and have now just gotten to about 6 people in Croatia. Um, I started that office on January 1. So COVID has had a pretty big impact on us. we've done well despite that. I think we do good work, and if you do good work, there tends to be somebody out there that wants to work with you. But it has not been as easy to get clients this year because of COVID, and there were, maybe 4 or 5 deals that we thought we were pretty close on in late February that all fell through because the company decided not to make the piece of software that they were planning on making. I've got friends in my industry who were decimated. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't about who your clients are. It certainly helps to think a little bit about which clients are recession proof. In America, if you hadn't had a recession in 10 years, you might start thinking about, if a recession comes, what can I do to protect myself? We happen to have a decent number of healthcare clients, and healthcare clients, have generally done okay. Like in some ways, some hospitals, for instance, have done pretty poorly because they're not doing, elective surgeries. But you know, healthcare benefits companies, some other healthcare companies have done generally pretty well during COVID, and so we're lucky to have some clients. I have a friend whose biggest client is a cruise liner. That obviously has gone kind of poorly because cruise liners are not doing much business and they're really scaling back on their software projects. So in my industry, generally, people are still making custom software. There are some industries that are doing well, and if you were either lucky enough or planned to be in a position for some sort of a recession, and you've got some clients that are a little recession proof, then that's certainly a good thing. Although it would have been very hard to predict, that we were going to have a pandemic of this magnitude.
Yeah, well, that's good. You were like kind of prepared
Yeah.
almost through your connections and stuff.
More lucky, but one thing in general is, like a lot of people don't like a service business like my business because, you know, service businesses tend to be lower margin. They tend to sell for lower multiples because, you don't know how, you don't have long-term contracts to know that you're going to have the service for a long period of time. The sales cycle for my business, takes a long time. Generally, um, you start working with a company, you do a small project, and you may do it for 6 to 9 months to sort of prove that you can do good work. So even when you go through a long sales cycle, then you do a small amount of work before you start doing bigger amounts of work. But one silver lining for my business is if you've got a bunch of clients and you've got some diversity of those clients, well, then you're a little bit more insulated if some of those clients struggle or stop doing work. So for me, one of the reasons why my business makes sense is that I've got a diversity of clients, and am not reliant on any one of them.
Yeah, yeah. So, with all your experience in making video games, do you have any advice on what makes for a fun and popular game?
Yes. There are a million things you can learn about this stuff. And the best way to learn what makes a great game is just to go out and play games that are doing well. There are a bunch of ways that you can look at this, but there's a company called App Annie and another called Think Gaming that publish some numbers about the games that are most downloaded, and you can find this information, kind of for any country, and then also how much revenue is generated. I think gaming gives you an estimate for how much revenue is generated in the United States and only on iOS for a couple of hundred games. So the first thing you could do is just go out and play games you think are fun, and try to understand what makes those games fun. And the better you are at being able to articulate why you think a game is fun, the better you'll be at making a game that's fun. Generally speaking, there is not a gigantic amount of innovation in mobile gaming. there aren't a lot of new genres. There aren't a lot of games that cross genres. There are companies that are looking at game mechanics that are tried and true, and either the strategy is to use IP, like movie IP, music IP, and to make something kind of based on that, or it's to just tweak a little bit, the basic kind of structure of older games. So, if you go out and you find kind of what people are playing, you can really have a good sense of what it is that makes a game fun. Um, Beyond that, I'll just say that, like, our first game is a word game. Um, and, it's kind of a non-standard word game. So I'm not sure that I can draw a lot from that. Match three games, are fun to most people. Like most people like puzzles. And so, puzzle games tend to be pretty good. And a lot of what's important about a puzzle game has to do with the theme, the pace, the colors, the sounds, the feel of it when you're actually moving pieces on your phone. And so, you kind of have to study up on what other games do, that do well. There are some mechanics that make a game fun. And I guess what I would say about a game, generally speaking, is like, one, if you can predict what's going to happen in the game, then that's not very fun, right? Like, there's got to be a certain amount of unpredictability in the game. Without unpredictability, there's no delight. There's no surprise, and without surprise, there's no delight. Also, like you gotta lose, right? Like a game that you always win is not really a game. So the game has got to be kind of appropriately challenging, and it's got to be, um, to me, like I look for games that allow me to use my brain in um, in a different way than I use during the day. So if I'm if I'm spending my day um, you know trying to solve problems for a particular client, I'm interviewing engineers all day. I'm, like trying to improve the internal processes in my company for how we make estimates for a particular feature. Then I want a game that allows my brain to kind of work on doing kind of a different thing. So, so it's got to be a kind of mode of thinking that's fun as well.
Gotcha. That's great advice. So, have there been any resources that have helped you along the way?
Yeah, a ton of resources. Um, I mean, one, it's been important to me to try to have mentors. So, to the extent that you can find people who, are willing to give you advice in a way that you can really trust, I think that's pretty useful. Um, William, your dad and I are, in the entrepreneurs organization together. That's been a pretty important resource to me. I didn't go to business school. I don't know that business school would have been super useful to me. It would be useful now, um, but I think I'm a little bit kind of past the point of going. But so EO has kind of been my business education. Um, there are a few things. Sorry, one of my kids will probably barge in at some point. There are a few other things that were pretty important to me in deal making. There's a guy named Brad, I think Feld. Let me see if that's right. Yeah, Feld, Feld.com is what I use to first really learn about deal terms. We've raised some money for a few of our projects. We've invested money in a few projects. And so understanding how investors think is pretty important in my business. Um, so that's one thing that was important to me. What else has been important to me? Obviously, just playing a lot of other games was really important, and that's important in any kind of tech business. So really trying to understand what makes another product successful. Um, like that's a thing you can learn just by using that product and trying to put yourself in the shoes of one of the customers of that company. So that was very valuable to me. I'm sure there are a few books that I read that were pretty important. Honestly, the 4 Hour Work Week was pretty important. Have you guys ever heard of that book?
No.
Um, it's about a guy who um, realizes that he can automate most of what he does in his company and ends up figuring out that he can run his business and he can generate about 80% of the revenue he has been generating and only work about 4 hours a week. So in other words, he was working, roughly 36 hours a week for 20% of his revenue. But why not just work 4 hours a week for 80% of the revenue and then go do something else, with the other 36 hours. So, like that's about how like pick your highest value customers and automate as much as you can so that you can, be as successful as you can, and provide as much value as you can. Generally speaking, several people have been helpful to me in kind of building a framework for how I evaluate opportunities. And that I think is a really important thing to do as an entrepreneur. Just have a list of, 10 to 15 questions that you always ask whenever you're evaluating an opportunity, and be really, really serious in asking those questions. Questions like, what sort of pain, does this particular product or service solve? What's the distribution model? How do you get people to understand? What's the competitive advantage or uniqueness of this particular product? Even if the uniqueness is just a distribution method or a brand. So, like having a good list of analytical questions. And there are, plenty of places to see that kind of stuff. But, like that's been pretty important in my business life.
That's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I actually remember back when the trend for mobile game developers was to charge $1 for each app, but
Yeah.
now most mobile games are free with in-app purchases. Like, how do you effectively monetize your games?
So it is universally recognized that you make far less money with pay up front games, unless you're in the console space and you're making, or like the VR space, and you're making super sophisticated games where people spend a lot of money. Um, you know, you it's different for different genres, but generally speaking, games make money either by getting the user to a point in which they feel a little frustrated by the experience and they want to spend money to sort of get to a new experience. So, like when you look at Candy Crush, my guess is even now, 50 to 70% of the revenue from Candy Crush comes from in-app purchases when someone loses a level. So, you've played that level 20 times, 50 times, 100 times, and you keep barely losing. And then afterwards, Candy Crush says, well, we'll sell you 5 more moves for $1. My guess is that some version of 5 more moves for $1 that allows you to get past that level and move on. That's got to be at least 50% of their revenue. So for that sort of game, that's a thing. The other thing is, sometimes games just aren't moving as quickly as you would like, or the experience is just not enhanced in a way that it could be, and people are willing to spend based on that. And then you just, you have to sort of look at individual games to see the ways in which they do that. I've always loved, um, I've always loved 8 Ball Pool. Have you guys ever played 8 Ball Pool? The
Yeah,
mini
I love
game?
it.
Really, really, really fabulous game. The great thing about 8 Ball Pool is you're playing some other random person out there, right? So you know that the game is not being rigged against you in that way, although games, rig themselves against you in many different ways. But you will play people in that game, and you will win more money the more you win. And when you win more money, you can, if you want to, start taking higher value bets. So you can get to a point where, for instance, you're betting 1 million chips on whether you win a game. And in that game, 1 million chips is probably worth $100 in currency. So, then you're playing one game with somebody where you're really betting real money. That happens to be the kind of thing that I think is exciting. And I think, obviously there are millions of other people that feel the same way. There are probably, many other millions of people who would not enjoy that game. But that is the sort of the game where, um, you know, they've got, I think, a smart sort of unique way of monetizing. I'm a big fan of your sort of head-to-head competitive games. I really like Clash Royale, for instance. I play a game a lot called Match Masters, which is sort of like a PvP version of Candy Crush. Those are the kinds of games I really like, and I like that kind of monetization method. You, in other words, like I can play for hours and hours to build up enough of a war chest to play in a 10,000 chip game or 100,000 chip game in 8 Ball Pool. But if I don't want to play that much, or I don't want to wait that long, I don't want to expend that much effort to get to the same place. Well, I might want to spend $5 and get 100,000 chips or get 10,000 chips, whatever it is, um, and uh, and then get myself to the place I want to be, quicker.
Yeah, so kind of like giving the people what they want without using as much effort.
Yeah, I mean that's the general. That is the general. It's sort of like I may feel like I've got great skills, and I want to put my skills up against the best possible players. But in this game, I can only do that if I spend a little money, or it's going to take me a lot longer to get to that point unless I spend a little bit of money.
So, what kind of networking and marketing have you done in your business?
So, the game industry, most of your users come from, just direct to consumer marketing, mostly through Facebook and Instagram. There are lots of other channels, but Facebook and Instagram matter more than anything else. So, your ability to make a great ad and really figure out who your users are. For Candy Crush style games, the average user uh, a female and over 35. At least, like more than 50% of users are going to kind of fit that profile, something like that. Maybe it's not quite more than 50%, but it's the largest plurality of users will be women over 35. Certainly, that's also true for spenders. It's probably more than 50% of spenders are women over 35 in most of those games. Um, what else can I tell you about? So, in games, the platforms do matter a decent amount about how much, about, like they can give you some promotion, and because of that promotion, you can get some cheaper installs. So, there's a lot of networking that's required there. Sometimes you make a game and you want another company that has a lot of games, either to run your ads or to actually, like provide advertising in your game for revenue split, or you want them to, you want them actually to publish your game and you want them to run the user acquisition campaigns. So, you got to do a lot of sort of networking around that. Not that hard to have those conversations if you've made a good game. So if you can make a good game and you've got some pretty good numbers, it's pretty easy to email publishers and say, hey, we've got this game, and our retention, day 30 is 15%, and our lifetime value per user is about $1.50. We believe that we can get it up to $3, but we'd like to have a publisher, once we do, those kinds of conversations are pretty easy to have. There are also a lot of IP holders where once you've made a great game, you can go to them. We used to have a lot of conversations with Warner Brothers where we try to convince them that we should make a game for the Big Bang Theory. We never quite got a deal done. Um, but sometimes someone will say, you make the game and we'll give you the IP, and then we'll be 50-50 partners, 60-40 partners, or whatever. So there's a lot of that kind of networking to do. My current business is all about networking, and it's usually referral based. We do a good job for somebody, and they refer us to somebody else. So it's pretty important that it's pretty important that we do a really good job for people. Um, so that's I do that. Mostly, I talk to friends also, and I say, hey, it seems like somebody, you might know a few people that might need my services. Could we talk a little bit about that? We also pay referral fees. So if you get us a deal with somebody, then we pay you a percentage of the money that we make for a year, and then after that year, we pay you a smaller percentage, but we pay that percentage forever. So sometimes you got to make deals like that to find work that you can do. So that's a pretty good synopsis of networking in my life. I generally speaking do a lot of networking where I'm just trying to do favors for people based on what I feel like I know. So I mentioned I had a history in politics. I'm a lawyer by training. I do the contracts for my company, so I've had some legal experiences. I've also raised some money before, and then helped some friends raise money. And so occasionally when I know somebody wants to raise money, I can help them do that. I try to do as many favors as I can. In part because I learn from it, in part because I like people I'm friends with and I want to help them, but also because it generally comes back to you at some point. I mean, in an unpredictable way. Do somebody a favor, even if it's 10 years later, they call you back and, end up, wanting to make a connection for you.
Yeah. So, to what do you attribute your success?
Uh, you know, um, when it came to games, I have three business partners. One of the things that I have mostly done well is I have mostly chosen good business partners. That is a very difficult thing. I've not always chosen good business partners, and occasionally I've had business partners that were not good business partners. But um, one really important thing is just, like enjoying spending time with smart people, meeting smart people, and being a good judge about, what people can do. My three partners are brilliant people, much smarter than I am. And the main thing I did when it came to them is I chose them. So that's number one. Number two, having a little bit of creativity helps, or at least having somebody in your company that's got some creativity. Again, all three of my partners, very creative, funny, interesting people, who can really come up with some unique ideas. Um, Also, just hard work matters a lot. Having a really good sense of how much work is required to do well, and being willing to do that work, I think, is just a necessary thing. And I'm not saying this is what you have to do, but I grew up with a father who worked 7 days a week, went to the office 7 days a week, and just really instilled in me a sense of knowing when the job is done, knowing when you've done a good job. Really, the job is never done, but knowing when, like you have done a sufficiently good job that you can be satisfied with the work that you've done. And so having a sense of that, I think, pretty important as well. That, and for me as an entrepreneur, I had to take a lot of chances and be lucky in some ways.
Not being afraid to take that risk.
Yeah, I mean, putting yourself in a position in which you feel like you can fail and it's okay. So in other words, like I I saved money for a time. I took, jobs on the side from a time, and I sort of figured out how to construct my life in a way that allowed me to take chances. And as soon as I started finding success, I started figuring out again how I could secure my foundation while also taking more chances. And my business now, also involves um, a um, like an evaluation of risk. So my engineers are all in Eastern Europe, and my business requires me to trust people that I find in Eastern Europe to work with. At the same time, having a diversity of clients is a part of my business that makes my business less risky. On the other hand, uh, my clients don't sign guaranteed long-term contracts. My business is totally dependent on whether or not I do a good job. And if I don't do a good job, I get fired. So, in that sense, my business is riskier, but, I've got to have a good sense that I'm going to be able to do a really good job. So, like everything in business involves evaluating risk. And the better you are at understanding the different ways in which you can succeed and the different ways in which you can fail, the better off you're going to be overall.
That's great advice. So, what do you like? What did you like most about working in the video game industry, and then what did you like least?
I mean, the creativity is certainly fun, and playing games is fun. So, um, Disco Bees, the game I mentioned before, um, Disco Bees has a lot of puns in it. So we made a lot of sort of little kind of wordy, stupid jokes in Disco Bees. Every time we made a new set of levels, we created a new character, and that character was supposed to be related to the particular set of challenges that you had to solve, different puzzles that you had to solve. So that kind of stuff is fun. Um, Playing games is fun, right? And so just sort of seeing a big part of the industry is just understanding new games as they come out. So we had a lot of fun doing that. Um, what else? I really, it's a pretty small world, games. Like you tend to know a lot of the same people. And if you're in games and you have some success over some period of time, like, you will tend to meet a bunch of people pretty quickly. And those people, generally speaking, have got a higher risk tolerance than other people, and this is true for entrepreneurs as well. And because of that, they tend to tell good stories. So I've just met a lot of fascinating, fun people in games, and a lot of fascinating, fun people as entrepreneurs. If you like hearing about people's success stories about their business, then games is an interesting place to be. Now, what did I like least about it? You know, Making games in a lot of ways is a lot like being a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant or any sort of professional thing that involves a gigantic amount of detail. So games are extremely technical, and there are a million ways that you can screw it up. So, as a person who's not an engineer, I've got to know enough about how a game is made to be able to talk to engineers, manage engineers, and workshop our way together around particular problems. I've also got to be able to manage business analysts, project managers, graphic designers, uh, animators and illustrators, uh, QA testers, people that test the game to make sure it's good, data analysts. I'm going to be able to design, essentially, analytics platforms and A/B testing platforms so that we can learn more. You got to be able to talk to customers and understand their psychology. Like there's a ton you have to know to be the CEO of a game company. So in that sense, like the level of detail was very similar to what it was like going to trial as a lawyer. And I'm not saying I disliked that. I'm just saying like it's tough. It's a hard job. So it's just, it's not a job where like it just feels like fun all the time. Sometimes, in fact, most of the time, there is a grinding aspect to it. And if you're not willing to grind, then it's probably not a great industry for you.
It sounds like creativity is like pretty encouraged and rewarded though, which sounds awesome. Like from what you've been telling us, it seems like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's I was a Latin student. Creativity is what we might call a sine qua non. Like you cannot be great in games if you don't have some creativity. If you don't at least have the ability to recognize what will be an appealing thing. I mean, I guess there's some people who might be able to kind of go through the motions without it. In other words, like if you hire people that have had some success as creative people, and then you go out into the market and you test their designs, that might be a way in which you could not be all that creative and do okay. But really, you really just need to have some sort of a sense of what's fun. And if you don't have a sense of what's fun, not for you but for everybody. And honestly, one of the dangers in being a game maker is you play tons of games, and so you get more into mid-core and hardcore games. So if you're a casual game maker, it can be hard to remember what a casual game is supposed to be like because casual games don't seem as challenging to you anymore. So they're not quite as fun to you. And so you really need to find a way to kind of maintain your sense of what is fun for a casual audience.
So, what is your greatest strength and weakness?
Ugh, many weaknesses. So let me try to start with some strengths. Um, I think my strengths are generally that I like people. And so I like talking to people and I like hearing about their problems and I like hearing about their challenges and hearing about their goals. So if you don't like that stuff, it's hard to help people solve their problems or reach their goals. Generally I think I have pretty good, ability to read people, and to sort of get to know them. Uh, I also got a decent amount of curiosity. So, you gotta be able to say, well, I wonder why they succeeded. And you've got to kind of go until you feel like you have got a pretty good grasp on the answer. And then you just, again, like, you have to have, I mean, this is a painful strength to have sometimes, but like, I am very risk focused. So like when I'm doing a project for someone, I'm thinking about all the different ways it can go wrong, and I'm doing everything I can to avoid all the possible ways in which we might fail our client. I think I've got a pretty good ability to do that, and I, um, you know, uh, when I do that well, we tend to do well for clients, and clients really appreciate it. So that's a pretty good sense of my strengths. One thing that I wish I were stronger at having a great sense of my weaknesses. So, like one of the best things you can do for yourself is really figure out what your weaknesses are and then surround yourself with people that are strong in the places where you're weak. I think I'd get better at that over time. But I wouldn't say it's one of my strengths. Um, Generally speaking, I am a better thinker when I can think with someone. When I have an interlocutor. And I've managed to kind of realize that about myself. I'm not an amazing manager of people, so I need to generally have people who are good at managing themselves. And I'm not amazing, when I'm, I'm not, I don't do an amazing job at having a good intuition as to whether somebody's going to be a great employee or a great partner. But what I found is that when I have an executive coach and when I work with my coach on um, on being clear about what qualities I'm looking for and coming up with questions that allow me to assess whether someone has the qualities I'm looking for and to what degree, then I do a lot better. So so over the last I would say a little more than a year, I've really focused on that weakness. How can I be better at hiring by being more specific about what I'm looking for? And there were some things I've always been, I think, pretty good at hiring. We've been good at hiring engineers, been good at hiring uh, graphic designers, for instance. But project managers and like the CTO type role that you have to have in any kind of a dev shop, I think I've been good, but not amazing about who I wanted to hire. So I've really, really focused on upping my game, and that's helped a lot.
Sounds like a key is to surround yourself with the right people.
There is no question that that is true, and understanding based on the jobs to be done, based on your goals, understanding what qualities you are looking for and why, um, I think matters a gigantic amount. And once you understand that, then like my tack is to ask a lot of open-ended questions to see if people can kind of reveal what they know and how they demonstrate a particular quality.
So, what best motivates you, and how have your entrepreneurial motivations kind of changed since you started?
Good question. Um, so I mean, like a lot of entrepreneurs, I am very, like driven by accomplishment. So every day, if I'm not productive, I'm unhappy. And every day that I am, like to be able to sleep at night, I need to be productive every day. I need to feel like I'm um, sorry, let me just tell this person that I will call him in just a sec. So, I, I'm driven by a certain standard of productivity. Um, and as I get older, I get better at sort of creating the systems that allow me to be more effective over time by adding the right people, but also delegating more effectively and taking shortcuts when I understand that that shortcut makes sense. Um, how else has it changed over time? I mean, the biggest change is I have 3 kids, and once you have kids, your need to like make to take a little bit less risk increases. So and to know that you're going to be able to provide for your family increases. So that's changed some things. Failing a little bit changes your motivation to hit the small details that make the difference between failure and success. And then what else? Um, Probably a few other things that just as I've gotten older and kind of know more have changed my motivations. But I think the big thing is just, you know, my risk tolerance has changed. And also, how aggressive I'll be to try to work with a company that I really want to work with has probably changed.
Great. So what's your next goal or big landmark that you're shooting for?
I'm trying to get to uh, 20 engineers in this office in Croatia. So, I'm trying to get clients who will appreciate the work that we do and have a similar sort of standard of quality to us. In other words, like the things that we think are really essential programmatically about making a great piece of software, good code review, automated testing, continuous integration, like companies that I'm trying to find clients that have sort of similar views on that kind of stuff, and really view us as a value. And I'm hoping to work kind of longer term with those companies so I can support a bigger staff in this office. So that's really my main goal. Um, Once I achieve that, I'll probably want to get a little bit bigger than that, but I doubt that I'll ever get bigger than about 50 engineers. That's my kind of longer term goal. But I still want to stay small enough that we've got a small number of clients and that I can personally be a little bit involved in every project.
You want the customers to have that personal feel.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got some unique product insight. I've got some unique insight. Now, let me put it this way. Being successful at making games doesn't just mean you're creative and understand how to make a game. It means that you can make a front end experience that's very interactive, complicated, and pixel perfect. It means you can make a back end experience in a database that can scale up and down really quickly. It means that your code base, like when you make a game, you don't know what parts of the game the users are going to be most excited by. And so you have to learn what they want and you have to adapt based on that. So you have to have a flexible code base and a modular code base so that you can kind of go where where the data tells you to go and where the users tell you to go. So, you also have to be somebody who can talk to a bunch of users and understand what they like and don't like. And then you also have to, be able to run A/B tests and have a customized data platform. You're going to be able to build that, know what kind of data to look at. And then, once you've done all of those things, then you've got to be able to make choices based on that. That experience is important to almost every company that we work with. So, we need to, we need to find ways for companies to understand our experiences, to get value from those experiences. And I want to be involved enough so that I can bring my particular value to all my clients.
Yeah, so that's why you only want like a certain number of engineers, like at most. So that way you'll still keep this like connection, really.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of, I mean, there are companies, based in Eastern Europe that have 600 engineers. They have a very different kind of business, and that kind of business, I think just doesn't fit my personality or my goals as well. I don't need to make that much money, and I also, um, like I need to, I want to spend time with my clients, know my clients well. Um, that kind of a business, 30% of your engineers are never working and you're spending all this time trying to kind of find stuff for them to do. Now, I do like making products, and at some point I may return to making a few products on the side, um, but that is, uh, like that is um, the gist of it is like I want to have some clients where I feel like we give a ton of value and there aren't too many of them, so that any aspect of the work that we do, they're capable of benefiting from.
Yeah, it sounds like when you start off in a business, you just want any customer you can get, but then as you move on, you kind of want to target in to the best customers.
Yeah, that's very accurate, and you just got to spend a lot of time understanding, um, who your customer is and what they want, and who you kind of fit with. And that's a lesson that you can learn over and over and over again, and it's constantly good to be, that's information that's constantly good to be engaging with. And your customers' desires change over time, so you got to really, kind of keep your finger on the pulse of what they want.
So where can our, or what were you gonna say?
I was just going to say, one thing about my business is it's tough to retain great engineers because there's huge amounts of competition for companies trying to hire great engineers. So it's important to have enough diversity of clients that engineers feel like they're getting to do interesting and challenging work. So that's a big part of the um, of the of the thing that you have to do as a company, is you've gotta have some diversity so that your engineers can feel like they're doing interesting stuff.
So where can our audience connect with you online?
Uh, Anybody can email me at josh@spaceinch.com. And of course, we've got a website, spaceinch.com also. So that would be the best. We will probably start doing more social media beginning in January. We've actually just hired a new head of operations in Croatia. And so that'll be one of the things that she is sort of heading up. So we may we'll be doing kind of more on social media and more in terms of a blog sometime soon. But if you've got people who are interested to learn more about games or interested, obviously, to do some sort of a corporate custom software project, we're happy to talk. And even if it's something we can't help with, we can't directly help with, we're normally good at helping people find the right team for them.
Yeah, we'll include all this contact information in the description of our video,
Yeah.
by the way. So
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been wonderful. So much good information.
this was definitely really helpful for a lot of people to watch this. I feel like our goal with the podcast, we just want to like inspire like maybe entrepreneurs, like future entrepreneurs. So if anyone's interested in like the video game industry, like even I feel like I am, like this is definitely really helpful. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. These are great questions. When you guys want an internship, give me a call.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.